Anthropic just revealed something huge, but not through a press release. It's showing up in a global hiring blitz that exposes exactly where the company's building data centers worldwide. And this moment signals that something fundamental just shifted in the AI arms race. Anthropic's not competing just on model quality anymore. They're betting that whoever owns the compute infrastructure wins long-term. For years, AI companies like OpenAI have depended on Nvidia for chips and cloud providers like AWS for data centers. You want more GPUs? You're waiting in line behind thousands of companies, paying whatever price they demand. But Anthropic's making a different bet entirely. The global hiring pattern reveals they are building their own network of data center facilities, which means they are seizing control of their own destiny. This isn't gradual expansion. The sheer scale and specificity of engineering talent they are hiring tells us they are preparing for something unprecedented. Why does this matter to you? Because in modern AI, compute is absolutely everything. Your model is only as good as the hardware running it. Right now, Nvidia controls the chips. Cloud providers control the data centers. Companies like Anthropic have to play by their rules. But what if Anthropic breaks free from that dependency? What if they control the entire stack? The hardware, the facilities, the electricity, everything. That changes the competitive landscape completely. And here's what the headlines are missing. To understand why Anthropic's making this move now, you need to understand the pain every AI company faces: compute dependency. For years, companies like OpenAI have been at the mercy of Nvidia's manufacturing cycle and cloud providers' pricing. Need more GPU capacity to train a bigger model? You're waiting in queue behind competitors, paying premium rates, and praying your data center never loses power. Anthropic hit a ceiling. They built Claude. They attracted major investors. They created valuable technology. But every time they wanted to scale, they had to negotiate with Nvidia, negotiate with cloud providers, and negotiate with power companies those providers depend on. It's like owning a restaurant but never owning your kitchen. You're always dependent on the landlord. So Anthropic made a strategic decision. They are building their own facilities. Hiring spree across multiple continents signals they're acquiring the talent to do it at scale. And once you own your own data centers with your own GPUs, everything changes. You train faster. You iterate faster. You move at your own pace instead of waiting for Nvidia's next manufacturing run or fighting other companies for cloud allocation. The companies that own infrastructure long-term win against companies that rent it. Google owns global data centers. Amazon owns massive infrastructure. Microsoft owns facilities worldwide. Now Anthropic's joining that club. But this move comes with risks most people don't understand. The hiring patterns tell a very specific story about where Anthropic's actually expanding. New engineering and operations roles opening in Europe, Asia, and North America aren't for remote software teams. They are for site engineers, data center operations specialists, power and cooling experts. These are the people who physically build and manage industrial-scale facilities. That tells us Anthropic's planning actual physical infrastructure, not just hiring for remote work. Now here's where physics becomes pure business strategy. A single modern GPU cluster can consume as much electricity as a small town. That's not exaggeration. Anthropic's using Nvidia H100 chips, and those consume massive amounts of power continuously. So location matters more than almost anything else. You need regions with cheap, abundant, reliable electricity. That's why data centers cluster in places with hydroelectric power or cheap wind energy infrastructure. Anthropic's hiring in Europe probably means Scandinavia or Central Europe, where renewable energy is plentiful and inexpensive. In Asia, they are probably targeting regions where electricity costs are a fraction of United States pricing. But here's the second reason geography matters: regulatory diversity. Different countries have different regulations around AI, different tax structures, different labor laws. By building globally, Anthropic isn't just chasing cheap power. They're building flexibility for a future where the United States, Europe, and Asia regulate AI completely differently. They're preparing to serve different markets without shipping data across oceans. That's infrastructure as long-term strategy. Let's make this concrete. When OpenAI wanted to scale, it made a strategic partnership with Microsoft and now relies on Azure data centers worldwide. That gave OpenAI instant access to thousands of GPUs, but locked them into Microsoft's pricing and infrastructure decisions. Anthropic's taking a completely different path. They're buying GPUs directly and building facilities themselves. Here's what that means in actual impact. Training a frontier AI model like Claude costs between $10 million and $100 million, depending on size and compute requirements. If Anthropic owns its data centers, they avoid paying cloud provider markups and middleman fees. That's potentially 20 to 30% savings on every single training run. Over 5 years, that's hundreds of millions of dollars they keep. But savings aren't even the biggest advantage. The real competitive win is speed. If Anthropic owns the GPUs, their engineers can train a new model version and launch it the next day. They don't wait for Azure to allocate resources. They don't wait for scheduled maintenance windows. They don't compete with other customers for compute time. Their engineers just access their own facility and iterate at maximum speed. In the AI race, speed to market wins. Your competitors train 3 new versions while you're waiting for cloud resources to free up. Anthropic's betting that owning infrastructure gives them that iteration advantage against OpenAI, Google, and Meta. And the math might support that bet. How does Anthropic's strategy compare to what the other AI giants are doing? OpenAI remains deeply tied to Microsoft. Google owns massive data center networks built over decades. Their infrastructure footprint is genuinely global. Meta owns facilities too, but it was built primarily for social media and advertising, not AI training. Anthropic's different. It's young enough that it's building data centers purpose-built specifically for AI from the ground up. And that's actually an advantage. Google's facilities are optimized for serving billions of search queries to users worldwide. Anthropic's new centers will be optimized specifically for training and serving massive language models. That's a different architectural problem entirely. Different cooling requirements, different networking needs, different power distribution. Microsoft is pursuing a hybrid strategy. They are building Azure data centers, licensing technology to OpenAI, keeping everything connected. Anthropic's building more independently. This raises an interesting question about the AI future. Is it dominated by integrated megacorporations like Google and Microsoft that own everything top to bottom, or is there room for specialized players like Anthropic that own infrastructure and models but stay independent? Anthropic's betting on the latter. They're saying, we can build this ourselves. We don't need to be acquired. We can stay independent and competitive. That bet explains the aggressive hiring. If they pull it off, Anthropic becomes a completely different kind of company, and that terrifies competitors built on cloud dependency. This change matters way beyond Anthropic's quarterly earnings. First, it signals that the AI infrastructure game is becoming a hardware and real estate competition, not just a software competition. You can't build a frontier AI company anymore without owning massive amounts of compute. That massively raises the barrier to entry for every future AI startup. If a new company wants to compete with Anthropic or OpenAI, they need billions of dollars for data centers and decades to build them. That favors the companies that raised capital early and started construction first. The AI industry is consolidating around infrastructure ownership. Second, this changes geopolitical dynamics entirely. When Anthropic builds data centers in Europe, Asia, and North America, it's not just business strategy, it's hedging against future regulations. Europe has strict AI safety requirements. Asia has completely different regulations. By operating in multiple regions, Anthropic prepares for different regulatory futures in different countries. Third, it creates a new kind of competition between nations. Governments care deeply about who controls AI compute happening within their borders. A data center built by an American company in Europe becomes a geopolitical asset. Anthropic's expansion is getting careful attention from regulators worldwide. And here's what most coverage completely misses. This is Anthropic's statement about staying independent from Microsoft, Google, and Meta. They are saying we won't be acquired, we won't be dependent, we'll build our own path forward. Let me explain why a data center is such a big deal for AI companies. A data center is fundamentally a massive warehouse full of specialized computers called GPUs, graphics processing units. Nvidia's H100 and B100 chips are the current standard. Each individual chip costs about $40,000. A modern data center might contain thousands of these chips, arranged in clusters and networks. Do the math, that's billions of dollars in hardware costs alone before you even start construction. But hardware is only the beginning. You need buildings. You need cooling systems because GPUs generate enormous heat during operation. A single GPU cluster running full speed might consume 10 to 20 megawatts of power. That's the power consumption of an entire small town. You need power plants or direct connections to massive electrical grids that supply that reliably. You need water cooling systems or industrial air conditioning running 24 hours every single day. You need networking infrastructure to move data at gigantic speeds. You need physical security systems. You need backup power for when equipment fails. You need redundancy in every system. Building all that from complete scratch takes years of construction and costs billions of dollars. That's why Anthropic's hiring spree is significant. They're not just adding staff members, they're announcing they'll spend enormous amounts of money and time on actual construction. Once those facilities come online, Anthropic's entire competitive position transforms. They stop being dependent on others. They become independent. That's a genuine game changer. Here's what all of this actually adds up to. Anthropic just announced, through hiring patterns, that it's becoming a vertically integrated infrastructure company. That's a massive change in strategy. It means Anthropic won't depend on Nvidia's supply chains or Microsoft's data centers. It means they move at their own speed. And frankly, it means they are betting they can outspend and outbuild their competitors in this race. Whether that bet works depends on execution, funding availability, and how quickly those data centers actually launch. But the direction is unmistakable. The future of AI isn't just about better algorithms or smarter prompts. It's about who owns the infrastructure running those algorithms. Anthropic's hiring spree proves they believe they can build that infrastructure faster and better than anyone else. So here's what to watch. Watch for announcements about which specific countries and regions get Anthropic's first data centers. Watch for construction timeline updates because that tells you if they're actually on track. Watch how the cost of building data centers evolves. That's a constraint nobody talks about but affects everything. Watch whether Anthropic can complete construction faster than Microsoft, Google, or Meta can expand theirs. The AI arms race just entered a new phase. It's no longer just about model training anymore. It's about infrastructure ownership. And Anthropic's making a dramatic bet they can win that race. Follow for daily updates on the AI and tech stories that actually matter.